Welcome to this experience where we dive into how unique experiences shape unique lives. I'm your host, Kyle Willis, and joining me today, Adam Schoenfeld, XVP Strategy and Sales Products at Drift, three-time startup founder, 2 acquisitions. Adam, thanks for joining the show today. How's everything going?
Going well. Thanks for having me, Kyle.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Adam, I've been following you on LinkedIn for a bit. I appreciate you getting back to me when I asked if you would join this experience show. And I think just to start, like, what's your deal? Where do you come from? Your story, background. I want to hear a little bit about like the early Adam, not the Adam that I've been following for the last 2 years.
You want like an awkward 7-year-old kid, or like a, socially out of place middle schooler, or like a college student thinking he's going to law school and trying to figure it out? Where do you want me to, how far back, Kyle?
Yeah, start us in high school. Like, did you play sports? What did you care about in high school?
I think my confidence and my understanding of what I wanted to be and do, like, progressively got better over time. Probably starting in high school. Middle school was a very rough time for me. I encountered a lot of bullying and negative social pressure, and just wasn't really sure what I was about, or what I wanted, or who I was, and had very low confidence. In high school, a couple of things happened. I switched to a new school and I started playing golf. And the teachers at my new school kind of did an amazing job of engaging me and getting me interested in extracurriculars like mock trial. And we had this thing called youth legislature, and you would go to Olympia and you would present bills. And I just kind of got these diverse learning experiences. I got more interested in academics. And meanwhile, I started playing golf, which I just latched onto. It was a special experience because my grandfather got me into the game, and he's been a rock in my life. So that was kind of the picture of me in high school. I was probably like low confidence, not really sure what I wanted or what mattered, but I was starting to figure it out, starting to become more of a learner. And then I went to Claremont McKenna College and played golf there. So got to continue pulling on that thread. And after that, like, I thought I would go to law school, but didn't know why, and made a last minute switch and got this great job in management consulting as a business analyst. And it was a phenomenal job. And that's where I really got excited about like business and marketing. And I liked working. I was like, oh, working's actually, I enjoy this, which some people think is weird. And so that was probably like the first step in me kind of, becoming more of an entrepreneur and getting into business in the way I am today.
That's awesome. It's crazy when I look back on middle school. So 8th grade, I tried out for the golf team and I made it. And I quit the team before the season started because none of my friends made it. And I was just like, oh, it's a bunch of nerds. I don't want to hang out with these kids. It's one of my biggest regrets, is not sticking with golf, playing through high school. I still play today casually, but I definitely felt similar pressures in middle school and gave into it, quite frankly. So that's cool though. That's a cool kind of entrance into, I guess, this conversation. And, of course, you've founded now 3 companies. And I really wanted to talk to you a little bit about Siftrock, which was acquired by Drift, and your time at Drift. So if just for the listeners, like, what is Siftrock? What was Siftrock when it started? And what was the idea that led to the foundation of that company?
Yeah, so Siftrock was or is continues to be part of Drift now as part of Drift's email product line. But the basic idea is, if you're a large email sender, if you think like Avalara or Dropbox or Citrix were kind of like some of our customers, they send out hundreds of thousands or millions of marketing emails each month, not your one-to-one sales emails, but your marketing emails, your newsletters, your nurture programs. And what happens is you get all these replies back, and it could be real people saying, I want help, or I want to talk to sales, or it could be like an automated message, like somebody's left the company. And Siftrock basically used some AI to collect all those replies, analyze them, and take the next action, whether it be routing the human response to a person or updating the database if somebody has left their job. And so it's kind of this niche part of email that was a gap in how the traditional marketing automation platforms worked. And my co-founder, Chris, who started the business before me, and he came up with the idea, had discovered this by just talking to some VPs of marketing. And then he built the tech to do it. And we got that in market, and it turned out that people actually had pain around this, and we were able to, sell a SaaS product to automate those processes and solve that.
That's wild. So essentially, Chris, he had the idea, the vision. He said, "Hey, Adam, I need somebody on the product side that can come in and help me blow this thing out." And then, like from a go-to-market perspective, at what point from, I guess, the initial concept to actually launching the product and taking it to market, at what point did you hire your first sales and marketing people?
It was a little non-traditional in that way because Chris had started it as like a side project on his own, and he's a phenomenal entrepreneur and had been a CTO and had been a VP of engineering, and just he's an incredible software engineer just in that dimension. And he's also a great entrepreneur. So he had it going, had kind of early customers, and I had been advising him sort of on the side. And at one point, I think it was maybe Glassdoor was the customer he was telling me about. And I was just like, man, this sounds like there's more opportunity here to grow. And I was in a transition myself, and I said, I should come on full time and like grow this with you and be your sort of ex post facto co-founder. And so there was some start to it. And when I started, the day I started, I had an account executive join with me who had worked with me in my last company. So in that regard, like there were some unfair advantages on my day one that were, set up intentionally, because I brought in Katie Ferris, who's pretty much the best performing sales rep I've worked with across 3 companies, and she was ready to go on day one. So a little non-traditional in when we started the go to market.
That's crazy. So were you primarily focused on demand gen, and then you just had one closer, and then you had Chris as kind of CTO?
I mean, I did the gamut, like, yeah, building the brand, generating demand. This is one of the things I like to do. I like to be a generalist and get my hands in the weeds. So early days, I'm on every call with Katie, and then I sort of back out of that, and I'm doing kind of customer success post sales, and then we hire a CSM, and I kind of back out of that. And so I had my hands in a lot of things, but probably my center of gravity is between marketing and product. So I wouldn't say I'm the best product management person or product leader in the world, and I wouldn't say I'm like the best marketer in the world, but like I'm good enough in both of those areas to where I can sort of define the positioning, build the brand, do some of the basic blocking and tackling on demand gen, and then I'm capable, because I've started 3 companies, I sort of know how to do the legal, accounting, admin stuff. So it's like these early stage companies, it's a lot. And the other variable I'll share here is that Siftrock was entirely bootstrapped. So we funded the business purely on cash coming in from customers. And if you want, I can talk about what made that possible. But so we didn't have any capital to like hire a bunch of people ahead of revenue. And so, I just had to do a lot of things, which I love doing. And that's what the job required.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's not your typical, it's definitely not your typical story, but I would love to learn a little bit more about that. And the reason why I think there are a lot of folks that I talk to who are incredible salespeople, incredible marketers, engineers, etc., who have an idea, but they don't know where to start. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's obviously beneficial to have some of those early customers where you're able to take that cash and inject it into the business and get going that way. At what point did you realize that you guys were truly onto something? Obviously, there was something there that sold you. You were able to transition from management consulting into this business. But at what point did you realize, like, hey, this thing has some legs?
I think consistent bookings is a really good signal. Like, can you go 3 months in a row where you bring in 4 or 5K of MRR in a SaaS business, of new MRR? So call it 50 to 60K of annualized recurring revenue. And we were on an annual contract model. So I think that really, really, tells you something, right? Consistency. Because, you can get a customer or 2, but then once you start to see, oh, it's repeating, month in, month out, we know that we're going to, be able to close a certain number of deals. That tells you a lot. And then I think the other thing is a couple months into that customer's life cycle post-sale, seeing if they're having success. Is it delivering on the promise? Like, what's their body language on the other side of the call when you're talking to them kind of post implementation or post onboarding? I think is huge and often underrated. because that tells you then, okay, like how's that cohort going to look, on renewal, and how's that cohort going to look maybe 2-3 years down the road. It's such a critical time. So I think probably those two things were we said, okay, this is a real business. And for us, onto something didn't mean that we would build a $1 billion unicorn. Onto something to us meant that we could be a multi-million-dollar cash flow positive, sustainable business that had nice growth. That was the goal with Siftrock, which I've done the venture thing, and then being part of Drift was extremely, into the venture camp where there's a lot of money. So this was a different business model with different goals in terms of what we wanted to create.
And it can't be just all, sunflowers and sunshine, right? Like, was there ever a point in time where maybe not you personally, but the group was, on the verge of giving up or throwing in the towel? Like, tell us about a time where things just got extremely challenging and we just had to like blast through that wall.
Early on, we didn't quite know how to position the thing. I mean, it's a very niche product. And Katie and I came in and we kind of had these ideas about ABM and how to position on that. And I think we lost our way a little bit, and we're frustrated in some of the early iterations of, how we'd position and kind of how we'd tell the story and create urgency for people to buy. So that was a little bit of frustration because, we just couldn't quite get it locked into gear. And then, we overcame that with a few product tweaks and a few positioning tweaks, and just, it wasn't one thing, it wasn't like this one wall that we bust through. It was more just like, I don't know, laying a couple bricks at a time to be able to step over, maybe is a better analogy.
Got it. Yeah. Well, yeah. One brick at a time. That's pretty cool.
And
So
honestly, Chris had done a lot of that early stage wandering in the desert pain, right? To get those first beta customers or first paying customers is such a moment of uncertainty that he had gotten past that point when I joined. And I had been, advising him, helping him, talking to him about that, but I wasn't doing any of that work. That was all him. In my past companies, I've been there in that stage. And so you have a lot more ambiguity and a lot more just kind of consternation in your gut when you're out there wandering the desert with, 1 paying customer or 0 paying customers. But in the case of Siftrock, we had a little bit of, just market proof based on his just willpower and effort that had gotten us there.
and was the goal, like, I guess, was there a point in time where we're like, all right, hey, the goal here is we want to get acquired? Like, was that ever a North Star, or is that just
No,
something that naturally happened?
that was never a goal. Chris and I, when we started working together, I remember it distinctly because we took this long walk around a park. It was a really nice day. And it's just like this moment with your partner in business that's like, well, what do we really want here? And it's like, we want to build a sustainable company, something that can endure, something that we think is providing utility to customers. We don't have these huge aspirations with this, which was different than how I was thinking about my last business prior to Siftrock. So it was kind of intentionally setting the bar a little bit lower there and thinking more in terms of sustainability rather than rate of growth or scale. And within that context, we said, hey, like, we should default mode to we're going to run this for 10 to 20 years. But like, if somebody comes around, we're going to have a conversation about what that means and if that's right. And we're going to look really honestly at the potential and how we feel and assess those opportunities. We didn't want just put the blinders on and say we would never entertain an acquisition. So to answer your question, it was never a goal, but we said, hey, if something comes in, we're gonna try to rationally sort of work up that option and that path. But our default mode would be to run this for the long term.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious too, I have not been a part of an acquisition, especially being a founder or owner of a business. However, I've been a part of many as an individual contributor here at Zoom Info. And I think from your perspective, it sounds like Drift approached you guys, hey, we want to take this thing on. During that period in time, we have a set amount of customers that we're currently servicing, right? There's a certain strategy in place that we've been running with for a handful of years now. When you got acquired, what did that actually look like from like an employee perspective? I think about were your employees excited about the acquisition? What did their roles change? There's so many moving parts. Could you just simplify kind of the acquisition process for us?
Sure. Yeah. I've been on both sides of this, like as an acquiring CEO and then getting acquired. And I think the thing I've learned is like, it's never what you think it's going to be. And in some ways it's going to be better. And in some ways it's going to be worse. And I'm not qualifying like good or bad. I'm just saying it's probably going to be different because these things are complicated, even in a situation where Siftrock was a very small business in terms of the number of employees, and Drift was a very fast growing, kind of growth stage business at the time. So what it like looks like is all of us came on and had jobs. We had sort of a plan for what we would do with Siftrock, how we would integrate it, how we would cross sell, how it would work strategically. And some employees were thrilled about it, or weren't so sure. I mean, there was like a mixed bag on that. So then we went forward, and it changed a lot over time. Like we changed specifically how it got integrated. I started as like the GM of Siftrock, and then rolled into a different kind of broader role within Drift. Everybody's role sort of shifted and changed, and we just figured it out as we went. So I think that's probably like what I've learned is you can't really forecast these things because you don't know like how the company's going to change and what you're going to learn once you get into it. But yeah, there's always a lot of like dynamics at play there.
Yeah, I can imagine there are some hurdles to overcome, but it's always interesting to me when we pick up another company, the actual logistics of integrating that new platform and the employees and bringing everyone in and the culture, and there's a lot of components to it to make sure that it's a seamless transition. All right, so I got a question for you. I'm a first time entrepreneur. I'm not, but I'm a first time entrepreneur, and you and I are sitting down having coffee. I've got this brilliant idea, and I ask you, Adam, where do I start? Where do I start? What do you tell me?
Probably two things that are pretty obvious, like to me feel like obvious, and this is just like my opinion, but I would say probably downgrade how brilliant you think your idea is in your mind, and find co-founders immediately. I would think those would be my pieces of advice. Because I think what ends up happening once the rubber hits the road on this stuff is like the team ends up mattering way more than the idea. And so if no matter how good you think your idea is, if it hasn't really been tested in the market, you don't actually know. And then if it's just you in this scenario that we're having coffee, I would say it's very low odds of success doing it alone. Now there's all these examples of solo co-founders, but if you really look around, usually there's a founding team, because you want to have multiple people who have skin in the game and are making sort of the sacrifice and putting the emotional commitment in to get it over those first hurdles, which are very hard to get over. And so I would say like finding co-founders is paramount at that point.
Now you have technical folks, right? A technical co-founder, and you also have just these revenue generating machine co-founders as well. If you're more on like your technical skill set is more on the sales and marketing side, where would you recommend going out and finding that technical, that CTO?
Well, if you're good at sales, you should then this is the ultimate test of your sales skills, right? Can you sell a person who is probably able to go command $500,000, $700K a year working in a big tech company, to give that up and partner with you to take a shot on this thing for some upside potential, right? That is like the ultimate test of you as a seller, as a storyteller, as a marketer to bring that person over. And there's like no shortcut. There's no silver bullet. It's a long game. It's relationships. In the cases of my co-founders, like it always was, we had some history and we had been getting to know each other for a long time. I'm actually in this process right now, and I just know it's going to take me 6 months to find the right person and get to know that person and get up to speed. And like now I feel like I have a decent track record to like demonstrate to somebody that I'm a decent bet. Like I'm not the best bet in the world, but I'm probably like in the middle range. I'm probably a decent bet. And so I don't know, there's just no shortcut. I think you have to go out and you have to network and you have to put yourself out there and then kind of see where you find good fit.
Got it. I would agree. There's no shortcuts, but I would also, and I'm curious if you've ever had a particular door that simply by simply knowing that individual, a door was opened that you never thought could be open? Is there a moment in time where you can go back to and say, yes, by just simply knowing this person, a door opened that allowed me to do X, Y, and Z? Has that occurred in your life?
Probably selling Siftrock to Drift, because I connected with David Cancel like a year before the acquisition. And we had just been in touch over LinkedIn and email, and kind of been like not talking about a merger at all, right? Just I was like, I like your podcast. I'm a customer of Drift. I'm a fan. So that certainly like lit up the power of just having a relationship with somebody, because then it led to, us actually talking about combining Siftrock into Drift. That's the first one that comes to mind, Kyle. I don't know. I'd have to think about it a little more for others.
Yeah, for sure. So that relationship was actually built on LinkedIn or email,
Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah. Oh,
So for the folks
digital.
at
Yeah.
home, for the folks that are listening, it doesn't have to be a handshake in person, get to know you for 10 years for there to be a successful business relationship.
No, I mean, we didn't even actually meet in person till the acquisition was imminent. Like it was a lot of just little back and forths of getting to know each other, seeing each other's stuff, being in a similar, operating in a similar environment digitally. And then at one point we had like a 30-minute call. And then from there, I got connected in with Elias, the CTO, and the product team, and they started looking at us from an acquisition. And it wasn't until much later that we flew out and actually spent a couple of days in Boston with the Drift team, and actually met David in person and like went out for dinner. I mean, it was a long way into the journey.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Wow, that is wild. I mean, it's true. We live in a digital world, no doubt about it. I've seen the power of LinkedIn myself, but I think it's encouraging for folks who feel trapped. Maybe they live in a certain area of the country where it isn't this major tech hub, and you walk into the local coffee shop and see Jack Dorsey, sort of thing. So I think that's encouraging to hear. I guess let's take a step aside from what you've done, where you've been. I'm curious to know, like, what do you care to be remembered for? And outside of work, like, what are a few things that you really care about? You mentioned your grandfather. What do you want to be remembered for?
I don't think too much about this, like legacy, or I don't want to have like a big imprint on the world. I want to have a big imprint on my family, and like be in a supporting cast type role for my kids. And I want, to have a great relationship with my wife. Been married 12 years, very proud of that. Have 2 young kids. It's really fun, really hard. And so probably like family is the lens I would think about that first, is just, am I being sort of good in those areas? And then, professionally, it's just like, am I doing something that's useful? Am I doing something that's like a net positive? Am I thinking long-term? Am I playing sort of the infinite game? If you've read James Carsey's book and some of that stuff, right? Like, am I just playing in a way that's sort of additive, and that I feel the how is a good example. I think that's enough for me. I don't have, big aspirations to have my face on, the Mount Rushmore of tech or something like that.
Yeah, that's cool. I definitely don't either. Certainly. I've been married for 2.5 years. Hopefully kids on the horizon in the next few years. But what do you do to set yourself up for success and making sure that you're, pouring into your family and spending time with your wife and kids, but also managing the responsibilities that you have on a daily basis from a business perspective?
Yeah, I try to be pretty systematic about like how I structure my days and how I like reinforce habits. And so I think that's been huge, to just create the space and the mental space. I think when doing a startup, especially, it's really hard because you're like thinking about the problem that you're solving all the time, in the shower, on a walk, doing this. And so I think the hard thing for me, at least, is when I'm at the dinner table with the family, or it's Sunday morning and I'm making pancakes for the kids and we're hanging out, like just to be there, right? Because the productivity can wait. Like I can solve that problem when I'm at my desk. So I think that's the really hard part, is just to like remain present. What helps me do that is structuring my time accordingly, so that, there's there's times when I'm going to be working on certain projects and work, and then there's time where I'm going to be with family and sort of putting up guardrails. Keeping my phone out of my hands is a very good hack. Like I don't bring it up to the bedroom. I just have like an old Bose Wave radio that actually has a CD that plays in the morning.
Oh, that's cool.
To wake me up. It's like, that's
right.
Such an easy thing just to keep it on my desk, and try to keep it out of my hands at dinner or at other times when I'm like doing family time. Those are some of the things, try to work out and relieve stress and do that stuff too, I think is big. But I think the biggest one is just kind of having some guardrails and some structure to like make sure I don't just slip into work mode all the time.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's crazy. I find myself constantly having to combat like, all right, I really want to think about this right now, but I know that I can't, or else I'm going to miss out on this moment. And that is more important to me at that time. So I'm also just learning and trying to learn more, better habits around either compartmentalizing or structuring my day in a way that allows me to be there and doing whatever it is that I'm doing at that time. So that's super helpful. So your time's up at Drift. Your time's up, right? And you're onto something new. Is that something that you can talk about? Can you let us know what you're up to?
I would if I knew.
Yeah.
But literally I'm taking some time to take a breath and be with family. And I know I'm super lucky and privileged to be able to do that. And so I'm taking advantage of this kind of moment, especially in the summer. I live in Seattle where the summer is like 100 times better than the rest of the year. So I'm trying to take advantage of that. And then what I'd like to do, what I hope to do, and what I want to do is start another SaaS company. I'm not exactly sure what. I have a few ideas, but there's a chance that I won't lock into the right founding team or the right idea, and then I'll kind of widen the aperture on other things that I could do. But that's sort of the path I'm going to pursue after just taking some time to really not commit to anything for a few months.
Got it. Do you feel as though you're leaning towards something in that conversational AI space? Is that something that you think you're realistically going to run with?
Conversational AI, meaning sort of like the space Drift was in?
Yeah, maybe the space that Drift was in, or I more so want to pick your brain on like, we recently acquired a company by the name of Incent, and I'm curious to hear how you think the field of conversational AI is going to impact sales in particular over the next few years. There's all this talk around, and people are fearful of, salespeople are going to lose their jobs, and I don't think that's ever going to be the case. But from what you've learned and seen, where do you think kind of this space is going to be in the next 2 years, and how's it going to impact sales in particular?
I remain very bullish on Drift, and I think Drift has created the category and done a great job. And I'm super big fan of the people over there. And I think that from the sales perspective, your question about will people lose their jobs, that I don't know. It's hard to say. I do think if you're an inbound only SDR and you're following up on leads, I do think there's a lot of risk. I think for outbound, the human mind or some evolved version of AI that we haven't seen yet is still needed. And I think for the AE or the quota bearing sales rep role, it's hard for me to see how that could fully be sort of automated out, but I'm not smart enough on AI to know like what the edges of that are and what the potential is. I would say if you're an inbound SDR kind of responding to incoming calls and responding to, inbound demo request leads, I think the customers at Drift, I wouldn't say they replaced their inbound SDRs, but they definitely were able to scale those motions using conversational AI. And the conversational AI that Drift has is remarkable. Like my mind was consistently blown by the head of data science that we have and former MIT guy and like what it could do. So in those specific roles, I might be a little worried. I might not advise people out of school to like take an inbound focused SDR job, over the next 5 years. But I don't know if the whole sales role could ever be replaced. I just don't know enough to know. It seems to me there's a lot of nuance and a lot of kind of human touch that makes selling really good, that could be lost. But yeah, it's very hard to read the tea leaves in AI right now.
Yeah, it is. I agree. I mean, I think that's one of the most valuable pieces of the sales process is that human connection, which I just don't think that we will ever get there. I understand, and what you're saying totally makes sense too on the inbound side of things. So for an SDR or for someone that's coming out of college who wants to get into tech sales, that typical career trajectory is SDR to like SMB closing role. If they want to stay in IC or if they want to go into management and climb up the ranks, like we all kind of understand that typical career trajectory or that career path.
Yeah.
For folks that are coming out of college who want to get into tech sales but don't have that closing experience yet, should they be a little bit more strategic about that initial step? Like, how would you set yourself up if you're trying to get into a closing role straight out of college?
I still think that path works. Like, I think the biggest factor, I'd want to be in more of an outbound role if I could,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I think that's the skill set that maps, better into the closing role. Um, I guess what I think matters most is which company you pick.
Hmm.
Right. And I'm sure you've seen this at Zoom Info because it's like almost a $20 billion company today. So like an SDR that joined, as employee 150 or 200 or whatever, like the path was incredibly positive for that person. Right. And so I think getting to a company where there's tremendous growth, because then they're going to be more motivated to promote. They're going to promote more quickly. I think that's probably the biggest factor. I think
Hmm.
where people get stuck a little bit is they take an SDR role at maybe a company that doesn't get out of the gate fast or pivots or changes, and then the opportunity isn't there, and they can get frustrated because they're sort of grinding away longer on the SDR job. But I've seen some contrarian points of view on this too, that like being an SDR longer like ultimately pays dividends. So I don't consider myself an expert on this, but I do still think that path is a solid path if your goal is to be like a tech sales closer role.
Yeah, I do too. I had a thought yesterday, and I was thinking about some of the CSMs that I work with. Their product knowledge is just extensive, and it's interesting to me that we don't see more CSMs transitioning into a closing role. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think what sales development does is it gives you the chops, it gives you the reps, it helps you develop that level of perseverance that is needed to make hundreds of dials a day and get told 99.9% of the time, right? Like, I think it does a really great job at that. But the CSM function allows you to really get hands-on with the product and understand customer needs and what's missing. So like, what is your take on kind of like a CSM to AE or AM transition? Is that a viable path? And could that be something that someone out of college could step into and go through? What's kind of your thought on that?
Well, I think out of college, you'd probably have to come in as like maybe a support rep or a support associate doing break
Mm.
fix ticket, open close tickets to get to CS, or SDR to CS. Like, I think is possible. Customer success to AE, I haven't seen that like a ton. I don't know why. I think you make a really good point. My hypothesis is just that they're not sitting there in the org chart, right? They're not in the revenue org in terms of they're not sitting with the closers. But I think we had at Drift CSM's move to account manager, which was our existing business quota carrying role. So I think that's probably the way that you have to do it, sort of like a two-step from CSM to AM to new biz.
Yeah, I haven't seen it that often myself, but I feel as though that could be a valuable. I feel like there are many CSMs, at least at Zoom Info, who could transition into a closing role and knock it out of the park simply due to their technical experience with the actual product itself and
Mm-hmm.
the natural conversations that flow. So obviously there are components to selling that can be coached, but that in-depth product knowledge when you've been working with the product for a year or two, I think is sort of invaluable. So yeah, that kind of went on a tangent there. But are you still playing golf? Is that something you still do?
Not so often with this
No.
is just with kids and everything. So hoping to play a little bit this summer, but I went from playing, in college, like 3-4 days a week practice and being on the team and stuff, into playing maybe like 20 rounds a year in my 20s to playing like 5 rounds a year now.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah,
Got to get
it's just
back out
I
there.
just priorities like on a nice beautiful Saturday. I would rather be with my kids, honestly, and be with my family, and so golf's taken a back seat. But I still do get to play with my grandpa a few times a year. He's still shooting his age at 88 years old or better,
That's
which is
incredible.
just such a role model in that. But no, not playing too much, Kyle. I wish I was.
Yeah, that's insane. Well, we'll have to get out if you ever make it down to Southern California, if I get up to Seattle. But yeah, Adam, I appreciate the time. What else? Like, where can people find you? What are you working on? You have a podcast, like all of that good stuff.
They can probably LinkedIn is the best starting point. I do have a podcast where I focus on interviewing Seattle's top entrepreneurs, operators, and investors. It's called the Built in Seattle podcast. You can go to builtinseattle.fm if you want to check that out. Some good sales tech leaders on there. I had Robert Wabi, the CEO of HighSpot. I had Manny Medina, the CEO of Outreach. So if I'm guessing your audience maybe skews that direction and might like those episodes. Yeah, but LinkedIn, it's Adam Schoenfeld, Schoenfeld.
Awesome. I'll be sure to I'll be sure to link all of that as well. But yeah, thanks for the time. It's great to chat, and I'm looking forward to the continued relationship and seeing what you're up to in the next 6 months.
Awesome. Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah.